This is the giant Pacific octopus, the largest on Earth, and almost nobody has ever watched one hunt. A grown adult stretches wider than a car is long. It carries 2,200 suckers, and every one tastes what it touches before the animal knows it. It has no bones. You'd think that would make it fragile. No, it can pour itself through a gap 2 fingers wide. And it isn't 4 miles down in some trench. It lives 30 feet under the surface off British Columbia, in water that keeps it out of sight while people swim right over it. Now, to be clear, it isn't the biggest animal down there. It isn't the fastest either, and it has no teeth in the way you're picturing. But there's a difference between being the biggest thing in the water and being the thing nothing else will go near. So how does an animal with no bones, no claws, and no teeth end up being the one thing on that reef everything else refuses to touch? And why, after all of that, do we still know almost nothing about one of the largest predators in the Pacific? I'm Axel, this is Drowned Earth. Quick thing before we keep going. If you've been liking these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button below. It would mean the world to me. We're on the road to 1K subscribers, please help me make that possible. Also drop a comment with your thoughts on the video. I make sure to respond to every single one. Okay, so let's start with what this animal actually is. There are roughly 300 species of octopus, and nearly all of them are small. The one you're picturing right now, the aquarium one, the one from the film everyone's seen, that's a common octopus, a few pounds, and it fits in 2 hands. Enter Octopus doflani is not that. A grown adult runs 20 to 50 pounds with an arm span wider than a car, and the largest individuals biologists actually take seriously come in around 157 pounds. Now, you've probably heard a much bigger number than that one, 600 pounds, 32 feet across. That figure is everywhere. Articles, videos, aquarium signage, the lot. And here's the thing. Here's where it comes from. In the late 1950s, a commercial diver named Jock McLean out of Prince Rupert told a scientist he'd hauled up an octopus that size. That scientist, William High, wrote it down in an NOAA fisheries paper in 1976. McLean had photographs. They didn't come out. That's the entire chain of evidence for the most repeated fact about this animal. One fisherman, one conversation, 2 decades after the fact, and a set of unusable photos. No scientist ever weighed that octopus, and nobody has weighed anything close to it since. So forget the 600 pounds. The number that actually matters here isn't weight at all, it's grip. A mature female carries about 280 suckers on every single arm. 8 arms. That's roughly 2,240 suckers in total, and the biggest of them run about 2.5 inches across, wider than the top of a soda can. According to marine biologist James Cosgrove, one of those can hold around 35 pounds on its own. One sucker, 35 pounds, and she's carrying 2,000 of them. Now here's the catch, and I want to be straight with you because I went looking for where that number came from. It's an estimate. It's scaled up from measurements a researcher took back in 1921 on a completely different octopus, with suckers 6 millimeters wide, in air, on a piece of wet wood. Nobody has ever hooked a live giant Pacific octopus to a spring balance and pulled. But even at the low end, the point holds, and the point is this: escape is not something this animal permits to be a variable. It doesn't need speed, it doesn't chase anything down, it has no teeth in the way you're imagining. What it has is a body that, once it's on you, is simply not coming off. And there is almost nothing in that water big enough to make it let go. A full-grown one has effectively no routine predator at all, which is where the real question starts. Grip explains why nothing gets away from it. It does not explain how an animal with no skeleton generates that kind of force in the first place. And it definitely doesn't explain how you open a clam. So, no bones. How do you push? The answer is that it does have a skeleton. It's just made of water. An octopus arm is what biologists call a muscular hydrostat, the same trick as your tongue or an elephant's trunk. Muscle fibers run in 3 directions around a fixed volume of fluid. Squeeze it in one axis and it has to lengthen in another, because the water inside has nowhere else to go. That's the whole mechanism. No lever, no joint, no bone anywhere in it. It braces against itself. The suckers run on the same kind of physics, and here's where most people have it wrong, including me until fairly recently. A sucker is not a vacuum. It doesn't suck. It seals its rim against the surface, and then muscles in the wall of the cup pull outward, trying to make the space inside bigger. The water trapped in there can't expand, so the pressure inside it drops, and at that moment, the ocean takes over and does the actual holding. It isn't gripping you, strangely enough. It seals onto you, and then the sea keeps you there. Then there's the one hard thing in the animal, which is the beak. It sits at the center of the arms, and it's the only rigid structure in the entire body. A composite of chitin fibers and protein, with no mineral content at all. And it isn't uniformly hard, which is the clever part. Evolution kept it soft and flexible where it anchors into pure muscle, then made it roughly 200 times stiffer at the cutting tip. That gradient is the only reason it works. A hard blade set straight into soft tissue would tear its way out. The beak is also behind the most famous claim about this species, that it can squeeze through any hole big enough to fit that beak through. But wait, I tried to pin that one down and I couldn't. There's no measurement behind it anywhere in the literature. Not one experiment, not one published aperture. We still can't tell you the number. What there is, instead, 4 respected institutions confidently naming 4 different hole sizes: a quarter, a lemon, 2 inches, 2.5. 4 different answers isn't 4 data points, it's 4 guesses in lab coats. Here's the one real figure anybody has published. For an average 2.5 kilo animal, the maximum bite gape works out to about 9.5 millimeters, under a centimeter. And that's a small octopus. Scale it up to a 50-pounder and it grows, but not the way the internet thinks it does. Now, the part that gets mangled absolutely everywhere. What happens when it catches something? It bites. And here's the thing, it is genuinely venomous. That's the correct word, not a dramatic one. Researchers have purified a crustacean-killing protein straight out of this species' salivary glands, and the venom paralyzes prey within seconds. Then, it goes to work on the shell. Sometimes it drills, and I mean an actual borehole, rasped through with a tongue covered in teeth while the saliva chemically etches the same spot. In butter clams, those holes average about 1 millimeter across on the outside. That's the drill mark you find on the shells piled outside the den. But here's what's wild. Drilling is the minority move. Most of the time, it just pulls the shell apart or chips it open with the beak. Most shells in a wild midden have no hole in them at all. And I know what you're thinking, because I thought it too. The saliva dissolves the crab, right? No, it doesn't. The external digestion turns out to be weirdly precise. It only breaks down the connective attachments, the membranes holding muscle onto shell. The meat itself comes out in recognizable pieces, and 2 hours later, you can still find identifiable chunks of crab sitting in the stomach. It isn't liquefying anything, it's deboning it, which brings us back to that pile outside the den, because those shells are the best evidence we have about this animal, and that leaves them out on the doorstep. Biologists call it a midden. Between 1996 and 2011, researchers surveyed 633 of these dens, from Puget Sound all the way out to the Aleutians. 4,904 individual prey animals, 69 different species. And the wildest part is the punchline of that whole dataset. 80% of everything on those doorsteps came from 5 kinds of crab and 1 clam. One species, the red rock crab, was 30% of the entire haul by itself. 69 species on the menu, and it orders the same thing every time. So we know precisely what it eats because it leaves the receipts outside its front door. But how it decides, that we don't know. Okay, so you'll hear that an octopus has 500 million neurons, more than a dog has. That number is real. It was counted in Octopus vulgaris, the common octopus. And here's the thing, this is the fact I most wanted to be true, so I checked it hardest. No one has ever counted the neurons in a giant Pacific octopus. Not once. The figure people quote for this animal is borrowed wholesale from a different species. What we do know about octopuses generally is stranger than the number anyway. Most of those neurons aren't in the head, They're out in the arms, and when researchers went hunting in the octopus's higher motor centers for a map of its own body, the thing your brain has, the reason you know where your hand is right now, they didn't find one. There's no somatotopic map at all. The brain holds no point-to-point picture of its own limbs. It doesn't drive the arms, it asks them. An arm cut off from the brain entirely will still perform a normal, correctly shaped reaching movement when you stimulate it. The program lives out there, in the limb, and the suckers on a severed arm will refuse to grab octopus skin, which means they can chemically recognize self with no brain involved whatsoever. 8 arms, each one running its own software, each one tasting everything it touches, all of them reporting to a brain that has no map of where any of them are. Now, the one experiment that was genuinely done on this species. At the Seattle Aquarium, 8 giant Pacific octopuses were exposed to 2 strangers over 2 weeks. Same uniform, deliberately identical. One of them fed the octopus every day, and the other one touched it with a bristly stick. After 2 weeks, the animals were treating those 2 people differently. A dark bar pattern under the eye, which way the arms reached, which way the funnel pointed, all measurably different depending on which human turned up that day. 2 identical people, one fine, one annoying, and it learned which was which. Now here's the catch though, because the version I'd been told was bigger than the paper. It wasn't all 8 animals on every measure. The study reports significance on specific behaviors, and on one of them, only 4 of the 8. That's still a captive invertebrate telling 2 humans apart in a fortnight. It just isn't the clean story you've heard. Same lab, same animals, a floating pill bottle. Over 10 trials, 2 of the 8 started jetting water at it to shove it away, and the tank current carries it straight back. Push, wait, push again, and the researchers called that exploratory play. 2 of the 8 though, not 8 of 8. No, really, I read the paper, because I didn't believe the version I'd been given either. Then there's the skin, which might be the most alien thing about the whole animal. Those color cells aren't cells that darken, they're organs. Each one is a bag of pigment with a ring of tiny muscles around it, wired directly to a motor neuron. And to show color, it contracts and physically stretches that bag open. To hide the color, it relaxes, and elastic recoil snaps the bag shut. Color as a muscle movement. Underneath those sit 2 more layers, one making shimmering interference color, one just scattering white. And now the part that shouldn't work at all. Octopus eyes carry a single visual pigment, 1. By every standard definition we use, this animal is colorblind. It's colorblind and it matches colors. So how do you copy a color you have never once seen? No one has solved that one. We don't know how it does it. There are ideas, a strangely shaped pupil smearing wavelengths apart, polarized light doing work that color can't, but neither has been demonstrated in a living octopus. Both are still guesses. And here's where it gets really bad for our intuitions. The skin itself turns out to be light sensitive on its own. A piece of octopus skin, cut off and sitting isolated on a bench, will still respond to light. Not with the eyes, with the surface. So put all of that together. The grip, the venom, the boneless intrusion, the distributed mind, the skin that sees. You'd expect this thing to be everywhere, dominant, impossible to miss. Wrong. Researchers in Alaska put sonic tags on 40 of them and followed them around for days. The animals spent over 90% of that time completely stationary, folded into a hole. 90%. Tagged octopuses in British Columbia held the same shelter for a month or more at a stretch, and in February of 2000, Puget Sound divers ran the first organized census for this species. 114 divers went in. They found 18 octopuses. Most of that coastline has never been searched at all. The most formidable predator in that entire ecosystem spends 9/10 of its life sitting in a rock, doing nothing. Which is what makes the next part so strange. For about a decade, we hauled them out by the hundred for sport. In April 1963, at Titlow Beach near the Tacoma Narrows, a dive club called the Puget Sound Mudsharks held the World Octopus Wrestling Championship. 111 divers competed. 25 giant Pacific octopuses came out of that water in a single day, from 4 pounds up to 57. It was on television. 5,000 people stood on the shore and watched it happen. But here's what's wild. There's a detail in the record I can't stop thinking about. The television deal needed visible action, and there weren't enough octopuses at the site to guarantee any. So the organizers went out beforehand, caught some, and laid them along the beach. They staged it, a world championship on live television in front of 5,000 people, and they had to place the animals first. Nobody could find enough of them, even then. So what finally stopped it? Not the wrestling, as it turns out. The sport died off on its own as attitudes turned, and in 1976, Washington made it illegal to harass shellfish without intending to eat them. That was until Halloween of 2012, when a 19-year-old diver named Dylan Mayer legally took a large octopus out of Cove 2 in West Seattle, entirely within the law. The limit was 1 per day. The public reaction was not within the law's expectations. 9 months later, in August 2013, the Washington Fish and Wildlife Commission created 7 marine preserves where taking this animal is specifically forbidden. It took exactly 1 legal octopus to get the species protected. And here's the thing about all of it. The grip, the venom, the wrestling, the preserves, this animal was never going to be here very long anyway. A giant Pacific octopus lives 3 to 5 years. That's the whole life. Everything you've just heard packed into about as long as a dog takes to reach adulthood. Then it breeds once and dies. 1 clutch and that's it. Though not, as it turns out, with 1 partner. Genetic work has found multiple fathers inside single clutches, sometimes inside a single strand of eggs. The female finds a den, seals herself into it, and lays tens of thousands of eggs. Then she stops. She stops hunting, she stops eating. For roughly 6 months, she stays in that hole, blowing water over the eggs and cleaning them, and she slowly starves. And here's the thing. The colder the water, the longer it keeps her there. In the far north, it can run past a year. And it isn't passive, which is the part that gets me. Biologists have described the decline clinically. She loses somewhere between 1/4 and 70% of her body weight. The skin retracts around her eyes. She starts wandering in an uncoordinated way, and white lesions open on her skin that never heal. Then the eggs hatch, and she dies. We even know the switch that runs it, a gland behind the eyes, which, when it's removed, makes a female abandon the clutch, start eating again, and go on living. And here's the catch. That experiment was done in 1977 on a small Caribbean octopus. Nobody has ever done it on this one. Which is where I have to leave it, because that's the honest end of what we actually know. We can't reliably tell you how old one is. There's no validated aging method for this species. No one has counted its neurons. No one has measured the hole it fits through. What else it does in that hole, nobody has seen. The biggest one anyone ever claimed was weighed by a fisherman in the 1950s, and the photographs didn't come out. And it's down there right now. 30 feet down off British Columbia, in water people swim in, there's a pile of shells outside a hole in the rock. That's most of what we've got. The sea took everything else, and we know this animal almost entirely by what it leaves on the doorstep. If you want the other end of this, the things down there we've never managed to photograph at all, go watch why the deep sea could still be full of unknown monsters next. Thanks for watching. There's a lot more down here. See you next time on Drowned Earth.